It's intriguing how life unfolds at times. You believe you know someone so well, especially someone you've spent nearly 2 decades with, and then suddenly they do something so unanticipated that it leaves you astonished. That was precisely what transpired one afternoon when my husband and I were at the pool. We had decided to spend the weekend at a resort, hoping to relax after a few hectic months. The children were grown, and our lives had become quieter, simpler, sometimes too quiet. So, we booked a weekend getaway. Nothing extravagant, just a relaxing time by the pool, away from the noise of daily life. I remember that day so vividly. The sun was shining, the air was warm, and the gentle breeze made the palm trees sway rhythmically. The hotel had this beautiful, tranquil pool area with stone tiles beneath my feet and sparkling water reflecting the clear blue sky. The scent of fresh flowers and sunscreen filled the air, and the sound of distant laughter from other guests created a pleasant hum in the background. Everything was peaceful, just the way I liked it. But even in all that tranquility, something shifted. We had been married for almost 22 years, and after all this time, we thought we had each other figured out. We had shared so many experiences together, the highs, the lows, the mundane moments, and the extraordinary ones. Yet there was something about this trip that felt different. Perhaps it was the fact that we were no longer rushing from one obligation to another. Or maybe it was that, for the first time in a long while, we had nothing to do but just be with each other. My husband Jack had always been the quiet type, strong but soft-spoken. He wasn't the sort of man who would ever make a grand gesture. At least that's what I thought. But that afternoon at the pool, my perception of him was about to change. We were lounging in the sun, both of us with our sunglasses on, not speaking much. We didn't need to. Our comfort with each other was enough. Jack was reading a book, occasionally looking up to watch the children splashing around in the pool, and I was just taking in the quiet beauty of the moment. It was the kind of lazy afternoon I'd grown used to, the kind that made me appreciate the stillness in life. I had just closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun sink into my skin, when I felt a shift in the air, a presence beside me. I opened one eye to see Jack standing over me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I didn't understand what he was doing. Then, without a word, he extended his hand to me. "Come on," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Come on, where?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Let's swim," he replied. I had to laugh. "We're in our 40s, Jack. It's just the pool, not a race." But there was something in his eyes that made me hesitate, a glint of mischief, an energy I hadn't seen in him in years. "Trust me," he said, still holding his hand out. "Now, let me tell you something about Jack. He was the type who liked to stay on the safe side of life. He didn't like taking risks and was never one for impulsive decisions. So, this was new. It intrigued me. It stirred something inside me that I couldn't quite name, but it felt like the start of something different. Reluctantly, I stood up and took his hand. I felt his grip tighten slightly, as if he were unsure of what he was about to do, but wanted me to trust him. Without another word, he led me toward the water. As I stepped into the pool, the coolness of the water hit my skin, sending a jolt through my body. I hadn't realized how hot I'd gotten lying in the sun. We swam slowly at first, side by side, not saying much. The quiet comfort of our movements mirrored the stillness of the afternoon. But then something shifted again. Jack stopped swimming and turned to face me, his expression no longer distant or contemplative. There was something else in his eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in him for years. I swam a little closer, still unsure of what was going on. Jack, what's this about? What's going on? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a deep breath and let the water gently rock us both. I could feel the tension in his muscles, a kind of anticipation that hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Do you remember the first time we went swimming together? He asked, his voice quiet but steady. I thought for a moment. Of course. It was that little lake up north, wasn't it? You were so nervous about the water. You didn't know how to swim. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Yeah, you taught me, and I've been trying to live up to that moment ever since. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? Everything I do for you, he said, his voice a little more intense now. I've always tried to be the man you needed, the man I thought you wanted, but I've never really taken the lead. Never truly been the man who could show you the kind of adventure we used to have. Suddenly, I understood what he was saying. He was talking about more than just swimming. He was talking about us, about the years we had spent together, the routines we had settled into, the complacency that had crept in. We had always been there for each other, but somewhere along the way, the spark had dimmed. The realization hit me hard, more than I expected. But before I could say anything, Jack did something that completely shocked me. He took my face in his hands, his touch surprisingly tender and gentle. And for a moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of us standing in the water, the world swirling around us. And then, without warning, he kissed me. It wasn't just a kiss. It was something more, a declaration, an apology, and a promise all wrapped into one. It was as if, in that moment, he was telling me that he was ready to be more than just the man I had known for years. He was ready to be something new for us. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about the pool or the vacation. It was about us reconnecting in a way we hadn't in years. As we pulled away, Jack looked at me, his eyes soft but full of intensity. I've always loved you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, I knew we were about to embark on something new together, a new chapter, one where the past and the future could finally coexist. I don't think either of us could have anticipated what was coming next. But it was in that kiss, in that unexpected, vulnerable moment, that I realized we weren't just two people swimming in the same pool. We were rediscovering each other in a way we hadn't even thought possible, and it felt beautiful. We floated in the pool, the warmth of the sun and the coolness of the water creating a strange sense of balance. I could still feel Jack's kiss on my lips, lingering there, like a secret shared between us. It wasn't just a kiss. It felt like a shift, a promise of something more. I had always loved him, but in that moment, I realized how much I had forgotten to truly see him. And maybe, just maybe, how much I had forgotten to see myself through his eyes. The water rippled around us as we swam together, our movements slow and deliberate, as if the pace of the world outside had paused for just a moment. There was no rush anymore, no distractions, It was just the two of us, floating in a quiet bubble. Jack, still silent, kept glancing at me with a softness in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. I had always known he was a man of few words, but in this silence there was so much being said. "You've changed," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Jack raised an eyebrow, his lips quirking into a small smile. "I've changed." I nodded slowly, as if trying to understand it myself. "Not in the way I mean. I just, I never realized how much I missed this side of you. The side that took risks. The side that was unafraid to be a little bold." He looked at me, his expression almost unreadable for a second before he sighed and leaned back against the edge of the pool. The cool tiles pressed against his back, and he let the water support him, his head tilted slightly towards the sun, as if contemplating what I had just said. "I guess I've been holding back," he said after a pause, his voice steady but thoughtful. "I thought I had to be this steady, reliable guy, the one who never made waves. And maybe in doing that, I stopped being the man you fell in love with." I wasn't sure where to begin with that. I knew what he meant. The years had passed in a blur of responsibility and routines, and we both had gotten so caught up in being the right version of ourselves that we had forgotten how to be the real versions. "Jack," I said quietly, swimming closer to him, "I never needed you to be perfect. I needed you to be with me. I needed us to be together. You don't have to prove anything." He met my eyes then, really met them, and I saw a flash of vulnerability. I could see the weight he'd been carrying, the quiet pressure of trying to meet expectations, both his own and mine. And maybe, just maybe, that was where the tension had been coming from. This unspoken pressure to always be the perfect husband, the perfect partner, when neither of us were perfect to begin with. "You're right," Jack said softly. "I've been afraid. Afraid of letting go. Afraid that if I didn't keep up this image, we might lose something." The weight of his words settled between us, but it didn't feel heavy or sad. It felt freeing, like a weight had been lifted, and the space between us was now filled with understanding, not with assumptions or fears. "You know, I was afraid too," I admitted, surprising myself with how easily the words came out. "I was afraid of growing old and letting the spark fade between us. Afraid of us becoming strangers." His expression softened, and for a moment I could see the familiar glint in his eyes. The same glint I had fallen for all those years ago when we were young and reckless and didn't have any of the answers. It was the glint of possibility. "We're not strangers," he said, his voice low. "We're just rediscovering each other. Maybe we both needed to get lost a little so we could find ourselves again." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe we weren't as lost as we thought. Maybe this was exactly what we needed. There was a moment of silence then, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like the quiet after a storm, the calm before the world starts turning again. And then, with a suddenness that caught me off guard, Jack took my hand and gently pulled me toward the deeper end of the pool. We both plunged beneath the surface, the coolness of the water enveloping us as we swam deeper, the sunlight flickering in patterns above us, casting playful shadows on the bottom of the pool. I felt the rush of the water around us, the sensation of weightlessness that only swimming could bring. It was freeing, almost exhilarating, And as I resurfaced, gasping for air, I realized something. I felt like a part of me had been awakened, a part that had been dormant for too long. Jack was beside me, his face more relaxed now, his eyes bright with a renewed energy. "Let's not stop here," he said, and there was something in his voice, a spark that I hadn't heard in years. "Let's keep going. Let's find new things to explore together." And I realized then that this wasn't just about swimming in the pool anymore. It was about diving deeper into the waters of our relationship, exploring the parts of each other we hadn't even touched in years. It was about learning how to breathe in the depths, not just float on the surface. There was so much more to discover, so many more layers to peel back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that excitement rise in my chest. We were both on the edge of something new, something beautiful. "You're right," I said, my voice a little breathless from the swim, but also full of possibility. "Let's find out what's next." As we swam side by side, the afternoon light beginning to soften, I realized that this moment, this quiet afternoon at the pool, was just the beginning. We were rediscovering each other in ways I hadn't expected, and it was beautiful. It was more than just a vacation. It was a turning point, a chance to truly start over. And in that moment, I felt hopeful. I felt ready. The days that followed our afternoon at the pool seemed to shift in tone. What had begun as a casual getaway, something to break the monotony of daily life, quickly became a space of deep reflection. I don't think either of us expected it, but we were both awakening in ways I never imagined possible. Jack and I had always shared a quiet connection, the kind that didn't demand much verbal expression, but was instead nurtured through subtle gestures, shared routines, and long, comfortable silences. But now, after that kiss, after that honest conversation in the pool, it was as if a floodgate had opened between us. We were talking more, not just about the surface level things, what to have for dinner, what shows to watch, but about what really mattered, about the quiet fears we both carried for years, the insecurities that had taken root when we weren't looking, the parts of ourselves we'd forgotten to nurture. I still remember the morning after our swim. Jack had woken up early, like he always did, and was sitting outside on the balcony, sipping his coffee. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow across the landscape, and I watched him for a moment before stepping outside. "Morning," I said, my voice still a little hoarse from sleep. He looked up at me with a smile that reached his eyes. Genuine, unguarded morning. I sat down next to him, the warmth of his body beside me, feeling more familiar now, like it had always been this way. "What are you thinking about?" He paused, taking a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes drifting out toward the horizon. For a long moment, he didn't answer. I thought maybe he hadn't heard me, or perhaps I had caught him off guard. But then his voice, low and steady, broke the silence. "I've been thinking about us," he said, his words careful but honest, "about how we've gotten so comfortable with each other, but somewhere along the way, we lost sight of all the adventure, the spontaneity, the connection." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "I know exactly what you mean." We sat there for a moment, both of us quiet, contemplating the space between us. There had been so many years where we had simply been together. We loved each other, sure, but we had fallen into routines. And while routines are comforting, they can also be the silent killers of connection if you aren't careful. After a while, Jack turned to me, his eyes warm. Do you think we can still find the adventure, the spark? It wasn't a question I had to think long about. Yes, I think we've just forgotten how to look for it. He reached over, gently brushing my hand with his, as if testing the waters. We both smiled, an unspoken understanding passing between us. The adventure we were looking for wasn't something external. It was right here between us, in the quiet moments and the gentle touches. It was something we had to rediscover together. How do we start? He asked. Let's stop waiting for something to happen, I said, the words coming out more confidently than I expected. Let's start making it happen. We both laughed, a soft sound that felt like a release. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It was about opening ourselves up to the possibility of new experiences, no matter how small. And that, I realized, was exactly what we were doing together in this moment, with no plan but to be present with each other. The rest of the day was simple but full of meaning. We spent it exploring the resort, wandering through the lush gardens, walking hand in hand by the shoreline, sharing stories about our pasts we hadn't spoken about in years. There was something incredibly freeing about it. Not because we hadn't shared these things before, but because it felt like we were truly listening now, in a way we hadn't in a long time. That evening, as we sat down to dinner under the stars, I couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. There was a lightness in the air between us, a joy in the simplicity of just being. We had become two people who weren't afraid to be vulnerable anymore, who didn't need to hide behind the masks we'd worn for years. And it was beautiful. It was raw and real, and it was exactly what we both needed. But it wasn't just the physical closeness that was changing. It was how we began to speak to each other, how we started to understand each other's unspoken needs. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at me, as if I were both the woman he'd always known and the woman he was just now beginning to understand. And in that gaze, I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't even realized had been dormant. After dinner, we took a walk along the beach. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver light across the sand. We talked, but more than that, we simply were together. At one point, Jack stopped and turned to me. I'm glad we're doing this. I didn't realize how much I needed it until now. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Me too. I think we both needed to stop waiting and start living again. We continued walking, our feet sinking slightly into the soft sand, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of all those years fall away. It wasn't the years themselves that had worn us down. It was the way we had let them pass without truly seeing each other. But now here we were, rediscovering the people we had always been and the people we still could be. The evening ended with us back at the pool. The lights of the resort flickered softly, casting gentle reflections on the water. We stood there for a moment, side by side, looking at the stars. I'm not ready to go home, I admitted, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Jack chuckled softly. Me neither, but I think we'll carry this with us wherever we go. I nodded, my heart full. We'll find the adventure together. And in that moment, I realized that adventure didn't always have to mean something new. Sometimes it was simply about rediscovering the magic that had always been there, waiting to be seen, and we were just beginning to see it. The days at the resort seemed to slip through our fingers like the grains of sand beneath our feet. But when it came time to leave, neither of us felt a sense of regret, only the quiet understanding that the magic we had discovered together wasn't confined to the pool, the beach, or the beautiful sunsets we had shared. It was something we could carry with us, something that had always been there, waiting for us to notice. On our last morning, as we packed our things into the car, the sun was just starting to peek through the clouds, casting a soft golden glow over the resort grounds. Jack and I stood outside the room, our bags ready, our time at this peaceful place drawing to an end. There was a contentedness between us now, a sense of peace that hadn't been there when we first arrived. You know, Jack said, his voice steady but soft, I didn't expect this trip to turn into what it did. I smiled as I zipped up the last of my bags. Neither did I, but I'm glad it did. Jack turned to me, his eyes filled with that warmth I had come to recognize as something deeper, something new. I think we needed this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think we needed to step outside of everything we knew and just be with each other without all the distractions. I nodded, my heart full. We were so focused on keeping everything together, on staying in control, that I think we forgot to let go and just live. But now I feel like we found a new way to be together, a way that feels more real. Jack took a step closer to me, his hand finding mine. It's funny, he said quietly, how you think you've already experienced everything with someone, but then you have moments like these that remind you how much more there is to discover, not just about them, but about yourself. I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his words sink into me. I've spent so much time thinking about what we've lost over the years. I forgot to think about what we still had and what we can still have. We stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, the world around us fading into the background. It was as if we had both finally found the rhythm we had been searching for, the kind of connection that didn't require grand gestures or words, just understanding and presence. Are we ready? I asked softly, my voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. Jack smiled, the same smile that always made my heart flutter, even after all these years. I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever comes next. As we loaded the last of the bags into the car, I realized that this trip had given us more than just a break from our routine. It had opened our eyes to the possibility of growth, of change, and of rediscovery. It had reminded us that love wasn't something you could put on autopilot. It needed attention, intention, and most importantly, patience. But most of all, it needed the willingness to evolve. On the drive home, we talked less and listened more. The quiet between us felt comfortable, no longer filled with the tension that had once clouded our communication. We spoke about our hopes for the future, about the things we still wanted to experience together, and about how we would carry this new sense of closeness with us, not just as a memory of a trip, but as a new beginning for our relationship. When we arrived back home, the house felt different. It wasn't that the place itself had changed. It was us who had changed. We had stepped outside the walls of our daily routines, and now we saw everything with new eyes. The mundane tasks, the familiar surroundings, none of it felt ordinary anymore. It felt like a canvas we could paint together, a fresh start. Over the next few weeks, we continued to nurture the connection we had discovered. Jack planned a surprise dinner date for me at a small Italian restaurant we had loved when we were younger, and we took long walks in the evenings, sharing little moments of intimacy that had once seemed so far out of reach. It wasn't always about big moments or life-altering decisions. Sometimes it was simply about the quiet exchange of a glance, the shared laughter over a cup of coffee, the way we now made time to truly listen to each other. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, moments of doubt, and times when we both felt the weight of responsibilities pressing down on us. But now, when those moments came, we didn't retreat. We faced them together with the kind of understanding and patience we had learned to cultivate in that pool under the moonlight on that unforgettable trip. Looking back now, I can say that the most unexpected part of that weekend wasn't the adventure we had planned. It wasn't the swim in the pool or the kisses shared under the stars. It was the realization that we were still capable of growing, still capable of discovering each other and ourselves, no matter how many years had passed. And perhaps that is the greatest adventure of all.